Hello and welcome to the UK Lebanon Tech Hub podcast. Today we have Charbel Tawil, CEO and Chairman of Forquest Technlogies, who just gave us a great talk on cybersecurity and its impact on the valuation of your startup. Thank you for that great talk. Lots of insights, lots of information, and we're going to dive right in with the first question. How do you define cybersecurity?
First of all, thank you very much for making the event happen.
Pleasure.
It was a real pleasure to be in front of your audience, and thanks for the infrastructure, amazing really, and the people in the service.
Thank you.
Look, cybersecurity is all about securing your infrastructure, securing your IP, your intellectual property, securing your customers' data. All these things need to be secured, so this is what cybersecurity will bring to the organization.
So, intellectual property, infrastructure, and data.
Absolutely.
The three main points. All right. And data is all the fuzz these days. With so many breaches, last year we had Ashley Madison who went under because of customer data breaches. Banks are at threat on a daily basis. We don't even hear about all the hacks. So what are the different stages or states of data, and what are the threats that exist at the different stages?
Yeah, so you've got actually data basically, if you want to make it simple, at three stages. You've got the data acquisition, so when we're typing in the data, or when we're processing that data. There is the second stage, which is the data in motion. So the data is transitioning on the network, internally or with the outside world, on the internet. And you've got the third stage, which is the data at rest. The data is not touched; it's just sitting there, waiting for someone to solicit it.
Okay. And what are the things to look out for while it is either being entered or in motion or at rest?
Yeah. So each stage has obviously its own vulnerabilities and a set of threats actually that can end up result in a data leakage, right? Or in a data damage. So we're hearing about ransomware where people can get in and encrypt your data or damage your disks, so damage your data. So data can be at risk. For the first stage, which is the data acquisition stage, here the big challenge that enterprises and startups have is first and foremost, who is manipulating that data? The person internally can be ill-intentioned and steal that data, divert the data, damage the data.
Or copy instances of it.
Absolutely.
Sell whatever they want.
Absolutely. So this is really one thing people need to be careful about, is the data acquisition itself. And you need also to protect the environment from a security perspective, from an IT security perspective, to protect the environment where the data is being processed. Because while it's being processed, people can also access to it, sniff it, extract it. They can even have mirroring of your keystrokes, so they see what you are typing and sniff that data. So while you're using the data, you need to make sure, or acquiring the data, using processing, acquiring, same stage, you need to make sure that it's protected. And also, you need to make sure that the end users, more broadly, who use that data, have a required level of IT security awareness, so that they don't do negligence or, excuse my French, stupid things, where they could have bad passwords, easy hackable systems, or could be dragged into some social engineering where hackers could be really following these users in terms of with the intention to hack them. So that's the first stage. The second stage, which is the data in motion, data transitioning in the network. Here too, the data can be hacked, intercepted, it can be sniffed, and in the outside world, when it goes on the internet, whether through wireless or then goes in the wire. Also here there are areas where hackers can really go directly and take the data, divert it, copy it, mirror it, and Well, what you need to do here at this stage is to ensure that internally your network is secure. You have a full control of the traffic. You see
Okay.
who is accessing that traffic. You need to, for the external part of the data transitioning, make sure that it is encrypted
Right.
and seriously encrypted, so that people who could sniff it or intercept it can have hard time reading. And at the third stage, where the data is at rest, you need to make sure that the environment where the data resides is completely secured. So there are areas for the data security, the infrastructure where it resides can be secured as well. And if you're hosting, as the majority of the startups do, if you're hosting your data at a hoster, make sure that you have an enforceable SLA where you can ask your hoster really legally for auditing, enforceable governance procedures. Who accesses the data? You need to see that governance
Right.
controlling
For accountability.
and the accountability within that organization around the data, because there is liability in case of breach
Yeah.
that goes back to the startup itself.
And you were saying it's a good move right now to move to the cloud, but it comes with a set of warnings and of red flags to watch out for. Does end-to-end what we call end-to-end encryption, which is being enforced in major startups like WhatsApp, for instance, does it really help?
Oh, it does. That's for sure. Because encryption is it's not sufficient, but it's a very strong move towards securing the data. And if you're encrypting end to end, you have a better chance of preserving the data. But that's not enough again. As we mentioned earlier, there are other factors, whether it is
Yes.
infrastructure vulnerability or human vulnerability, whether it is negligence or malicious behavior, that also can impact.
So when you're a startup, obviously you don't have a huge amount of data. Hopefully you will as your user base grows. But since you're still starting small, should you start encrypting right away? Is it something that you should do early on, or is it okay to wait until your data becomes valuable?
Well, let me take it a bit differently, George. The earlier stage the startup is at, the more vulnerable it is, the more fragile it is, and the less it can survive a breach or a low action.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, you need to have early on, the earliest possible, clear policies and governance around data usage, especially that it's not going to be only your data, the
Yes.
salaries of your employees, for instance, but it's going to be your customers' data. So you need to have early on, even before the first byte of data gets into your system, a clear governance, clear procedures, auditable procedures
Okay.
on how you are going to manipulate the data. And that is something that you can show customers and get their traction and appetite to work with you, because they'll be more secure versus coming with saying, look, sorry, I don't have procedures, I don't have governance, a couple of guys whom I trust very much access the data, so this is not going to fly. And it won't fly with the investors neither, right? However, with good governance, clear, auditable governance procedures that are written, applied, if they audited, they demonstrate that they're applied, then it's much better. Encryption is part of that.
Right. And you were mentioning the couple of guys whom I trust. It's not easy always to think about these things early on, because startups have lots of expenses and lots of things to think about early on, and entrepreneurs aren't always well seasoned yet in their jobs. Is it better to hire someone in-house, or would you recommend outsourcing at least for the first phase?
I absolutely do not recommend to hire in-house. Even whether actually it is for a startup or for a more mature company.
Okay.
I'm not talking about large banks with 50 years operations
Of
and
course.
more. Here it's a different story. But I'm talking about these startups, even in mature phases, for simple reasons. First of all, how do you hire? On which criteria the CEO, who's not an IT security specialist, even his teams or her teams, they're not specialists in IT security. So on which criteria can they hire? How can they make sure that the hiring is pertinent? Supposedly they do. They hire.
Of course.
Supposedly they hire. Then how do they make sure that the person is doing the right things and in the right order? How do they make sure that the results are pertinent and the ones they want to achieve? How do they know? They don't know. The CEO is someone who has a business capacity, is specialist in something completely different, and cannot become all of a sudden a specialist in cybercrime and cybersecurity and all these kind of complicated stuff. And last but not least, how can you make sure that this person that you hired in terms of to do that security internally is keeping track with all the new developments? So to which training send that person? How can you make that person remain up to date? It's impossible.
Okay.
The easiest way is to go for specialized consultants who can offer you this kind of service, like security officer as a service, like what we do at Forquest Technlogies.
Yep.
And here, for example, you can rely on someone who can work for you maybe half a day per week, but will do the right things in the right order, and has got the up-to-date capacity to bring the value to your company in terms of all the new stuff and malware and techniques that are arising to protect yourself against them.
So obviously here the advantage would be a reduced cost compared to a cybersecurity specialist in-house with augmented, well, not augmented, but a bigger array of tools and updated knowledge and expertise.
Absolutely, yeah. And a startup cannot afford paying a chief security officer, like you said, also permanently, full-time job. They'd rather have a good sales manager, they'd rather have a good pre-sales person or a marketing manager, someone who could help increase the value of the business rather than focusing on IT security, particularly for those who are outsourcing even their IT infrastructure, not to have to worry or hire people to worry about that. So they want to outsource that. That's the same logic that.
And it's easier than hiring someone and realizing, oh, I've made the wrong choice because I didn't know how to hire for IT security,
Absolutely.
I guess.
Absolutely.
So what's one thing to watch out for when hiring an IT company to do your securities?
First of all, you need to make sure that these people have the right certifications.
Okay.
Listen to what they have to say in terms of regulations, in terms of standards, in terms of experience. Look at the CVs of the people they're proposing to support you execute on that mission. Interview that person. So
it's legitimate. I can go and say, can I please meet the person who will be in charge of my account?
Of course, you have to do that. Because we're talking about security. And there's no issue with that. And if the supplier doesn't like it, means that there is something wrong. If they jump on it, it means that they are confident that they will provide the right service.
Interesting. One piece of advice to entrepreneurs who know nothing about IT security but really need their data to be secure.
Yeah. My first advice is that as a CEO, you continue focusing on what you do best, which is developing a product and doing business in providing the right go-to-market, etc. Keep focusing on that and rely on specialists who can really help you cover this part contractually, but rely on specialists, because as we've seen in the presentation, even large companies get a huge hit when on their stock price when they get a breach. We've seen examples with up to 50% drop in the stock price, permanent damage to their reputation, loss of profitability. So it can be very nasty. And you don't want to, as a CEO, you don't want to invent yourself as an expert in these things, because it can really turn very bad and you get out of business because of a breach. So go to specialists, have a good discussion. If the price is a challenge, then probably you can negotiate with your venture capital, with your investor, to add a line that corresponds to that service.
Okay.
And the investor would welcome. I'm sure of that. The investor will welcome your this approach, because that will be more convinced that you are wary of the dangers of security breaches, and you're making the necessary steps and investments to secure the application and company they are investing in.
Very interesting. Well, thank you very much for that. That was very interesting. And for our listeners, we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much, George. Really enjoyed it, and I hope that the audience will too.
Sure they will.